On June 17, 2015, in the heart of Charleston, South Carolina, a warm Wednesday evening turned into one of the darkest nights in modern American history. Inside the basement of the historic Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, known as Mother Emanuel, 12 people sat in a circle for their weekly Bible study. Bibles open. Voices gentle. They had come together after long days of work and family responsibilities to pray, to learn, and to strengthen their faith. Among them was Reverend Clementa Pinckney, a 41-year-old pastor and South Carolina state senator, a devoted father and tireless advocate for justice. There was 87-year-old Susie Jackson, the beloved family matriarch whose warmth touched everyone. Ethel Lance, 70, who kept the church running with quiet dedication. Cynthia Hurd, 54, a librarian who had served her community for over 30 years. Sharonda Coleman Singleton, 45, a high school coach and speech therapist who poured love into every young person she met. DePayne Middleton Doctor, 49, a mother of 4 with a voice that could lift spirits. Myra Thompson, 59, studying to become a minister. Tiwanza Sanders, 26, a recent college graduate full of hope and promise. And Reverend Daniel Simmons Sr., 74, a steady pillar of wisdom and experience. They welcomed a stranger that night. A 21-year-old white man named Dylann Roof walked in, sat down among them, and joined the discussion. They made space for him. They smiled at him. They treated him with the same kindness they showed everyone, because that was who they were. For nearly an hour, the group studied scripture together. Then, as they bowed their heads for the closing prayer, everything changed in an instant. Roof stood up. His voice cut through the room like ice. "I have to do it," he said. "You rape our women and you're taking over our country." Then he pulled out a .45 caliber Glock pistol loaded with hollow-point bullets and opened fire. The gunfire was relentless. Screams filled the small basement. Bodies fell. Blood stained the open Bibles and folding chairs. Roof moved through the room with cold purpose, reloading his weapon 7 times as he fired more than 70 shots in just 6 minutes. Tiwanza Sanders, bleeding heavily, tried to reason with him. "Why are you doing this?" Roof answered by shooting him again and again. One survivor, Felicia Sanders, lay on the floor pretending to be dead with her 5-year-old granddaughter beside her, forced to listen as the horror unfolded. Roof told her he would spare her life so she could tell the world what happened. When the shooting stopped around 9:06 p.m., 9 innocent people were dead. 1 more was wounded. Roof walked calmly out the side door, got into his car, and drove away, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable devastation. This was not a random act of violence. Dylann Roof had planned this massacre for months. He had become radicalized online through white supremacist websites. He specifically chose Mother Emanuel because of its deep historical significance in the black community. Founded in 1816, the church had survived repeated attempts to destroy it, including after the 1822 slave revolt plot led by Denmark Vesey. Roof wanted to strike at the heart of black faith and resistance. He hoped his attack would ignite a race war. He was arrested the next day after a nationwide manhunt. During his trial, he showed no remorse. In 2017, he was sentenced to death. But the story did not end with his conviction. The Charleston Church Shooting forced America to confront painful truths about racial hatred, online radicalization, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, and how easily hate can turn deadly in the 21st century. If hearing what happened in that church basement tonight shakes you to your core, if you feel even a fraction of the pain, anger, or disbelief that something like this could happen in America in 2015 and that similar hatred still festers today, then I need you to do something right now. Hit the like button. Not for me, but for the 9 lives that were stolen simply because of the color of their skin. For every black family that still carries the fear that their church, their school, or their neighborhood could become the next target. Subscribe to this channel because staying silent, scrolling past, or pretending this was just one isolated monster helps the system of racism and discrimination keep operating in the shadows. Your like and your subscription send a clear message that these stories matter and will not be buried. If you think this doesn't affect you, remember that hate never stays contained. It grows when we look away. Don't be part of the silence. Like this video and subscribe now. The victims deserve at least that much from every one of us. Welcome back to the channel, where we expose the raw realities of racism and discrimination across the globe by focusing first on the explosive American stories that too many want to downplay or forget. Today we are taking a deep, unflinching look at the Charleston Church Shooting. By the end of this video, you will understand far more than the basic headlines. You will see exactly how a young man became consumed by white supremacist ideology. You will witness how a historic black church became a deliberate target because of its legacy of strength and resistance. And you will discover how the nation's response, from immediate acts of extraordinary forgiveness to heated debates over Confederate symbols and gun laws, revealed deep, unresolved fault lines in American society. The mainstream told us it was a tragedy. They called it a hate crime. But they rarely went far enough to connect the dots to the larger patterns of racial hatred that stretch from America's past into its present, and from America outward to similar patterns around the world. This video will connect those dots. We will walk through the lives of the victims, the minute-by-minute horror inside that basement, the public explosion that followed, the global mirror of this kind of violence, and the hidden data that shows this is not just one evil individual but part of a persistent system. This story is painful. It is uncomfortable. But facing it honestly is the only way we stop repeating it. So stay with me as we go deep into the Charleston Church Shooting. Before that night, everything in Charleston seemed ordinary. Mother Emanuel stood as a pillar in the black community for nearly 2 centuries. It had survived arson, legal bans on black worship, and violent backlash after Denmark Vesey's 1822 revolt plot. It had been a sanctuary during slavery, a stop on the Underground Railroad, and a center for civil rights activism. Generations found hope and strength within its walls. Reverend Clementa Pinckney led the church with quiet dignity. A state senator as well as pastor, he fought for police accountability, better education, and economic fairness for all South Carolinians. He was a devoted husband and father to 2 young daughters. The other victims were the backbone of the community. Ethel Lance kept the church clean and welcoming. Susie Jackson was the grandmother everyone adored. Cynthia Hurd had spent decades serving the public as a librarian. Sharonda Coleman Singleton coached young athletes and preached with passion. DePayne Middleton Doctor balanced motherhood and ministry. Myra Thompson was preparing for her own ministry. Reverend Daniel Simmons brought decades of experience and wisdom. And Tawanza Sanders, the youngest at 26, represented the bright future, a recent college graduate eager to contribute to society. These were not people looking for conflict. They were everyday Americans, teachers, librarians, coaches, parents, grandparents, and community servants who gathered every week for Bible study because their faith was central to who they were. They welcomed a stranger that night without hesitation because kindness and openness were part of their values. Meanwhile, Dylann Roof lived a very different reality. A high school dropout from a troubled background, he spent most of his time alone in his room, falling deeper into the internet's darkest corners. After the Trayvon Martin case, he began what he called research into black-on-white crime and quickly landed on white supremacist websites filled with cherry-picked statistics and conspiracy theories about white genocide. These sites convinced him that black people were the enemy destroying his country. He created a personal website called The Last Rhodesian, where he posted pictures of himself posing with the Confederate flag, burning the American flag, and wearing symbols linked to apartheid and white nationalism. In his manifesto, he openly expressed his desire for racial segregation and his belief that violence was necessary. He even made a list of potential targets, focusing on historic black churches like Mother Emanuel because of their symbolic power in the black community. Despite clear warning signs, including prior arrests and erratic behavior, Roof was still able to legally purchase a Glock .45 handgun. Everything appeared normal on the surface right up until the moment it wasn't. A peaceful Bible study. A young man poisoned by hate. Two worlds colliding with devastating consequences. Around 8:16 p.m. on June 17, 2015, Roof entered the church and sat down with the group. For nearly an hour, the Bible study continued normally. They discussed scripture. They prayed together. Roof barely spoke but blended in enough that no one felt threatened. Then, just after 9 p.m., as the group bowed their heads for the final prayer, Roof stood up. He delivered his hateful statement about raping women and taking over the country. Immediately afterward, he began shooting. The first shot struck Reverend Pinckney and others near him. Panic exploded in the small room. People screamed, tried to hide under tables, and shielded one another. Roof fired methodically, moving through the space and targeting those who were down. He reloaded his weapon 7 times, firing more than 70 rounds in approximately 6 minutes. Tiwanza Sanders, already wounded, bravely asked Roof why he was doing this. Roof responded by shooting him multiple additional times. Felicia Sanders and her young granddaughter lay motionless on the blood-covered floor, pretending to be dead while listening to the horror around them. Roof told Felicia he would spare her so she could tell the world what happened that night. The shooting was execution style. Victims were shot at close range, many hit 5 times or more. The entire attack lasted only about 6 minutes, but it left 9 people dead and 1 survivor wounded. At approximately 9:06 p.m., Roof walked calmly out the side door, got into his car, and drove away into the night. 911 calls flooded emergency lines. First responders arrived to a scene of absolute carnage, bodies slumped in chairs and on the floor, Bibles scattered and stained with blood. The survivors' later testimonies revealed Roof's chilling calmness throughout the attack. He showed no emotion, no hesitation, and no mercy. This was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated act of domestic terrorism designed to terrorize an entire community and spark wider racial conflict. After fleeing the church, Roof drove north. A massive manhunt was launched across several states. The next morning, June 18, he was spotted and arrested in Shelby, North Carolina, after a local florist recognized him from news reports and alerted authorities. In the immediate aftermath, some tried to downplay the racial motivation, framing it as another random mass shooting or the result of mental health issues alone. But the evidence quickly dismantled those attempts. Roof's manifesto, his website, photographs with Confederate symbols, and his own statements to police made it clear, he was driven by white supremacist ideology and explicitly wanted to start a race war. The public reaction was swift and powerful. Vigils and protests filled the streets of Charleston and spread across the country. President Obama delivered a moving eulogy at the funeral, calling for national reflection on racism and gun violence. The Confederate battle flag flying on South Carolina state capitol grounds, a symbol long defended by some as heritage, became a national flashpoint. After decades of controversy, the flag was finally removed from the Capitol grounds in the weeks following the shooting. Media coverage was intense, yet often careful in its language. Many outlets hesitated to label the attack as domestic terrorism outright, preferring the term hate crime. This created contradictions that fueled further debate. Families of the victims demonstrated extraordinary grace during Roof's bond hearing just days after the massacre. One by one, they addressed him directly, offering forgiveness despite their fresh grief. Their words, "I forgive you, God have mercy on your soul, we forgive you but you must repent," went viral around the world and turned part of the story into a powerful example of radical grace in the face of evil. Yet behind the headlines, deeper questions remained about how Roof had radicalized online so easily, why he faced no significant barriers to purchasing a powerful handgun, and whether law enforcement or society had missed clear warning signs. The explosion of public attention forced conversations that were messy, polarized, and in many ways incomplete. If a stranger walked into your place of worship during a peaceful gathering, sat among you, and then revealed themselves to be filled with deadly hate, how would you react in that moment? Would you still offer the same open welcome and grace that the victims at Mother Emanuel showed, or has the world made us too guarded and afraid to trust? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know ever experienced discrimination or fear in a sacred space? Share your experience. These conversations matter because understanding one another's realities is where healing and awareness can begin. While the Charleston Church shooting is fundamentally an American story, it did not occur in isolation. Similar patterns of ideologically driven attacks on places of worship and minority communities appear around the world. In 2019, a white supremacist in Christchurch, New Zealand, attacked 2 mosques during Friday prayers, killing 51 Muslim worshippers and live-streaming the horror. Like Roof, he had been radicalized online, embraced replacement theories, and aimed to provoke broader conflict. The tactics and weapons differed, but the underlying hatred and desire to terrorize the other were strikingly parallel. We see echoes in attacks on churches in Nigeria, where Christian communities face repeated targeted violence, or in places where religious minorities endure bombings and massacres. In Europe, rising far-right extremism has led to assaults on immigrant communities and mosques. Historical violence against indigenous populations in countries like Australia and Canada finds modern reflections in ongoing discrimination and occasional outbursts of hate. The methods vary by local context, but the core remains the same: using violence against vulnerable gathering places to assert dominance, spread fear, and deepen division. The Internet has made these ideologies borderless. White supremacist networks share propaganda and tactics across continents. Charleston forced America to confront its own mirror. Globally, it served as a reminder that no society is completely immune when hate is allowed to fester unchecked. The numbers behind these tragedies paint a sobering picture that rarely receives sustained attention. According to FBI hate crime statistics from 2015, there were 5,850 reported hate crime incidents, with race, ethnicity, or ancestry bias motivating nearly 60% of them. Anti-black bias consistently represented the largest single category within race-based hate crimes. Places of worship, especially black churches, have long been disproportionately targeted, from the 1963 Birmingham church bombing that killed 4 young girls to countless acts of arson and vandalism over the decades. Online radicalization played a central role in Roof's case. He self-radicalized through simple searches that led him to extremist sites. Research since 2015 has shown how algorithms and echo chambers can accelerate this process for isolated, vulnerable individuals, particularly young men. Roof cited groups like the Council of Conservative Citizens, which provided a pseudo-intellectual framework for his beliefs. In the years following Charleston, reported hate crimes in the United States saw notable increases, with spikes tied to political events and heightened social tensions. Anti-Muslim incidents also surged sharply around the same period. These statistics reveal that Roof was not merely one deranged person acting alone. His crime was enabled by a combination of historical racial legacies, easy access to firearms, mental health gaps, and an online environment that rewards and amplifies extremism. The data shows a measurable, persistent pattern rather than random anomalies. 9 lives were erased in 6 minutes inside a place meant for prayer and community. 9 families were left to grieve while the world watched. An entire city and nation were forced to confront the reality that the ugly legacies of slavery, Jim Crow, and racial violence still echo loudly in modern America. And yet, in the midst of that unimaginable pain, the victims' families offered something profound: forgiveness. Not because Dylann Roof deserved it, but because their faith would not allow hate to have the final word. That grace does not erase the need for accountability. It does not fix the systems that allowed a radicalized young man to arm himself and walk into a church with murder on his mind. The real gut punch of this story is that Charleston was both a horrific tragedy and a warning. It showed how easily hate can turn deadly when fed by online poison and left unchallenged by society. If we convince ourselves that removing a flag or sentencing one man to death means the problem is solved, we dishonor the memory of those 9 souls and set the stage for the next tragedy. The victims lived lives defined by service, love, faith, and community. Their legacy demands more than momentary sadness. It demands honest reflection and real change in how we address the roots of racial hatred in America and beyond. The Charleston Church Shooting laid bare the persistent fault lines of racism in American society while also highlighting the extraordinary strength and grace that can rise even from the deepest horror. It forced difficult conversations about hate, radicalization, gun access, and the unfinished work of racial justice. Those conversations are still needed today, perhaps more than ever. Thank you for watching this entire video and staying with this difficult story until the end. If it moved you or opened your eyes in any way, please share it with someone who needs to see it, a friend, family member, or anyone still unaware of these realities. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future deep dives into stories of racism and discrimination that matter. In the next video, we will expose the 2025 campus protest crackdown that revealed new forms of institutional bias against certain voices. Thank you again for your time and attention. Let's keep seeking the truth together.